And welcome back to the Health Marketing Collective, where strong leadership meets marketing excellence. I'm your host, Sarah Payne. Today, I'm here with my good friend and former guest of the show, Jennifer Hobblesrud. Welcome back, Jen.
Glad to be here, Sarah.
Yeah, thanks for doing this with me today. I asked Jen to join me for a joint host chat, if you will. And the topic that we're going to dig into is the power of executive thought leadership on social media. This is going to be the second episode in a 3-part series leading up to the health conference in Las Vegas in October, just a few short weeks away. And the theme for this year's conference, they always have a theme. The theme is Be Bold. So we're doing 3 episodes inspired by this theme of Be Bold. I think it's a great theme for the conference, Jen. From my perspective, it feels like it's really calling on the industry leaders to really lean in, to step up and driving meaningful change. What do you think of this theme?
I agree, and I think it's really well timed. Not that there's maybe ever a bad time to be bold, but we know in health, it's time for some bold and innovative action. And it's, to me, that also means being boldly authentic. What do you stand for and what are you going to do? So I love it.
I love that. And it's an election year. Yeah. Right. There's a lot of sort of change on the horizon, regardless of what happens in the outcome of the election. Healthcare is going to need to be a priority for the next administration. And I agree. I think being bold means standing for something that matters. Yeah, standing up for driving true and meaningful change in health outcomes. So with this framework of being bold, I wanted to talk about something that is so critically important for any brand to do if they want to be considered true thought leaders in the industry, and that is executive thought leadership on social media. I personally believe that this is an underleveraged thought leadership strategy, and it's very underappreciated in terms of how critically important it is. I think there's a lot of executives that are still not active on social media, and some who are active, but not doing it maybe in the right way or really maximizing that channel from a thought leadership perspective. I just think that if they're not contributing to and advancing critical issues within the industry on social media, it's a huge miss. What are your thoughts on that, Jen?
I couldn't agree more, Sarah, and I'll be bold on this topic too, and I'd love to know what you think about it. I think 25 to 30% of any leader's time should be dedicated to communication, internal and external, and where social media and putting yourself out there as an expert maybe was an option 10 years ago. I don't think it's an option anymore. I think as a leader, it's something that you have to be doing, because at the end of the day, people trust people more than they trust brands, and they can help gain that brand trust. So I think it's critically important that they do it and that they learn to do it well and that we support them.
Yeah, well said. And I love that you actually put a specific percentage around that in terms of their time. I never really thought about it in that way. And I think it really helps communicate how important this really is to them and to the organization. And you're absolutely right. I don't think it's an option anymore. I think that it not only elevates your brand's overall thought leadership presence, but to your point, it's all about trust building, right? It humanizes your brand, increases trust. People want to do business with people. Yes. And if they're only hearing from the brand on social media and not from the leaders behind that brand, people understand that there's a communications department, there's a marketing department that are behind the brand. They want to also see that those wonderful messages that are being put out there are authentically mirrored in a unique way by executive leadership.
I couldn't agree more. And it's that other really important layer that obviously has to be consistent to work. I don't think you can do it with just a brand voice, and I don't think you can do it with just an executive voice. They're legs of the stool, and you need them all, and they do different things.
Absolutely. And one of the things that they do differently, so we hear from a lot of our clients and a lot of the CEOs is they want to get more podiums at conferences like health, right? And you cannot get a big podium without being an active thought leader on social, period.
I mean, you tell me, you do a lot more of that than I do. Well, when you pitch someone for a big stage, assuming you're not getting the request from them, what's the first thing they go to do to see if they want you on the stage?
Social media. Yep. They're going to go,
right?
Yep. They're going to go check you out on social to see, it's basically your CV. It's your resume to prove you're worthy of that stage. And they want to see that what was submitted in the speaking nomination or the proposal comes to life on social media, that this isn't just something that, the brand woke up one day and decided was going to, be a thought leader around because it's all of a sudden the cool thing to do in the industry, but there's actually proof and evidence over time of not only the brands, but the executives' authenticity to the commitment around that particular topic, whatever it is.
Absolutely. And I'm sure what they're looking for is, we know this will be valuable to your brand, but is your executive and thought leader going to have something unique and bold to offer our audience? Because that's what they're promising. So
100%, right? Say something different than what everyone else is saying on the topic, right? There's a lot of noise out there on different topics inside of healthcare. AI is one of them. So many other examples. How is your brand and your executive bringing something unique and different to that conversation to truly advance it? Yeah, and I guess we should talk about channels too. When we say social media, which channels are really best for leaders to leverage? And I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but I personally feel that LinkedIn is the most effective platform for executive thought leadership. So when I say executive thought leadership on social, like, I'm primarily thinking about LinkedIn, just given the overall sort of professional focus of the platform. Would you agree with that?
I 100% agree. And I think that does have to do with exactly what you said too, being authentic to the channel. And so if you're on TikTok, that isn't the place that you're going to talk about serious thought leadership ideas. You're going to have a different approach there. And not very, very few people are probably going to be able to pull that off and pull it off with the resources they have. So I do 100% agree with you that LinkedIn is the default platform to do thought leadership for executives.
Yeah. And I think their algorithm is built for that, right? Yep. Their algorithm rewards educational, thoughtful content. And the platform itself is well suited for longer form posts, more in-depth content that you're not going to be able to get from TikTok and some of the other platforms. So I just wanted to provide that sort of anchor for the conversation. I'm really primarily today talking about LinkedIn. Doesn't mean that brands couldn't have, say, an Instagram strategy or insert other platform here. But yeah, I'm really speaking about this from a LinkedIn perspective today.
Yeah, and I think LinkedIn is the one, to your point, that's building products around those things that, should you happen to have a paid budget that you can put behind this, they're building products for that. And I think the other platforms, generally speaking, are probably better suited for influencers more so than thought leadership. And sometimes those blend together. Often they don't.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. So we've talked about why we need to be doing this, but I think one of the major hurdles for most brands, most companies, is going to be, how do you convince your CEO, your executives, that it's worth devoting their time to social media? I mean, you already threw out a percentage. What'd you say, 25, 30% of their overall time should be spent on communications, and that includes the internal stuff, but social, their presence on social has to be baked into that. Yeah. So, we know they're extremely busy. How do we make this feasible for them? And here's what I hear all the time. I hear, I don't have time. I hear, I'm too old for this. I've heard that before. I've heard, I'm a really private person. I've heard people don't really want to hear what I have to say. And I understand that many of those things are real barriers. But I do see many of them as psychological barriers that are being put up as excuses. And I think, the comms team, the marketing team has to sort of work with them in a conversation to change their discomfort around this, right? build up their confidence and help them embrace that.
Yeah. So can I ask you, because you and I have come from different sides of this in terms of you're trying to convince clients. I'm trying to convince my internal partners. What has been successful for you with clients in, I guess, in two areas? Then one, getting them open to even trying it, breaking down those barriers. And then maybe what's been most important about equipping them or getting them comfortable once you've convinced them that it's worth it.
Yeah. Yep. So it is a two-parter. I would say on the first part of that, just getting them to be open to taking that next step forward and trying it.
Yeah.
Is, I think it's an honest conversation that if what you want is to be known as a true leader and you want to have the press calling you as a top source for their articles and you want to get podiums on the stage, you're going to have to get over the discomfort. Like, you're going to have to dive in with 2 feet and make this a priority. And we, as a, communications team, marketing team, are going to help with that, right? We're going to help source maybe some timely subjects that, they can post around and put into their own voice. But they have to trust the process. They have to say, yes, I agree. This is a priority. This is important. We're going to do this, and just jump all in. Because if they kind of hang on with that hesitancy, I see that it keeps going back to that, and it's just going to continue to be deprioritized. And you kind of just have to have that conversation of trust with them and just kind of get them to go, this is important. Do you agree? Can we do this together?
Yep. And I think you can feel that hesitancy in their online presence if you've gotten them out there, but not fully committed. And that may come through in volume, but it may come through in tone and what, I'll go back to your theme, bold, what they're boldly willing to step into. And there's certainly a fine line there, but.
Yeah. So then the second part, right? So now you've got their commitment. Yes. Okay. We're going to do this. And then they're like, well, how do I do it? Right. They need some level of, and it depends where they're at. Some people might need more training and coaching on this than others. Maybe some actually need their profile to be more updated and robust than what it is today, to support that being a strong thought leadership channel for the company and for the brand. So some of that sort of tactical stuff is going to need to be worked out. But I would say a next great step with them is to help them, do a whiteboard session with them, help them document their core beliefs, and topical pillars that they're passionate about, and do that at sort of the highest strategic level of what that list is, and then help them turn that into a content strategy for LinkedIn, right? And maybe the content strategy is like, they're like, I don't, like, what is that? What is that phrasing? It's not their world, but turn it into something that feels manageable, like a posting calendar. Like, you're going to do this 4 times a week, and 2 of your posts are going to be about this topic. One's going to be about a company thing, and this other one's going to be about this over here. Like, take their core beliefs and what they're passionate about and turn it into, this is how it fits inside of your week.
I agree. And I think, to me, what is most important to raise up out of what you said too is you're working with them to know their lane. Like, this is what you're going to talk about. And I think that also helps them transcend brand, which makes them especially powerful online, because they're talking about their core beliefs. They're talking about the issue or the thing that they're passionate about. They just happen to be doing that at work for, said employer, which also helps that brand. But it helps them to come across really authentically and more boldly when they're out using their expertise.
Yeah. So step 1, getting the commitment. Step 2 is doing kind of this whiteboarding session to get their, core beliefs, their POV captured, then translate that into something that can be, seen inside of their week, and they can kind of bucket these things in their brain. And then on an ongoing basis, I think you need to create some sort of a feedback loop with them. Maybe in the beginning, it's like you get on the phone with them once a week or once every other week to say, hey, you're doing great, on this particular topic, you could have even gotten deeper on that, right? Like there's a whole story behind that. You posted one sentence. Gosh, I would have loved 3 paragraphs on that. Or, you're doing great with the post, but I want to see more engaging with the comment section with people. And then they can take that stuff. They're like, yeah. Because they love feedback. They really do. And I think, honestly, I don't think CEOs get as much feedback as they actually want to get. I think they're very eager and hungry for that. And I think they will take notes on that stuff and go implement it.
And most of them know this isn't their core area. So they need and want it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of trust to be built between comms and executive leadership around this and helping them be successful, helping them become the thought leader they know they are.
Yep.
Right. Like many of these people have such amazing point of view. Yep. And so much expertise to offer the industry, but it's hidden inside of, the channels with the people with whom they're meeting with, right? And it's our job to help the world see that. A lot of these companies exist because of these innovative leaders that are thinking differently about the industry. And just think about the power if we can unleash that.
Yeah. And going back to something you said, Sarah, for those that say, I don't really have anything to offer. In my experience, most of the people who have gotten to that point in their career have a lot to offer just based on experience, the altitude with which they see their business in the world, and the success they've had in their area of expertise. And I think that's wildly interesting to most people out there who are trying to solve the same problems that they're solving or build their career in a similar way.
And again, I think that comes from having a moment of low confidence, right? We're all human. And I think even leaders feel that sometimes it's the, I do think CEOs can have imposter syndrome, particularly when it comes to something like this. Yep. Like, is this really my lane? Do people really want to hear from me? And the answer is yes and yes.
Yeah. And am I going to get myself in trouble? There's fear, right? I'm out there, I'm public.
Yes. But I also think, to that point, I think there are risks of not being on social media. And like you said earlier, it maybe was an option a few years ago. It's not an option anymore. And therefore, there are risks of not participating in thought leadership on social media. So, the risk of you saying something, right, that can't be managed, right, or handled in some way is going to be pretty low. We're going to put all these filters in place, that's going to be safe. Frankly, the risks of not participating are far greater.
I agree. I think they're far greater. And also, let's just say you do even have a slip up, which again, I think is relatively low risk when you've got people around you supporting you and you are already an expert. The risk of not doing something is greater. It's guaranteed and it's much more long term.
Yeah. I mean, if we're back at the getting them committed stage, I think some of the things that are fair to say is your competitors are going to have a bigger megaphone than you.
Yep.
There's this giant channel over here that you're choosing to mute.
Yeah.
Right. With tremendous amount of access to real buyers out there.
Absolutely.
You're going to have less visibility and influence. You're not going to be seen as relevant. And that, to your point, has a lasting impact and danger to the company and to the brand.
Yeah, absolutely. Question for you related to this. Do you think that it should be part of how we hire people going forward? And should it be something that we increasingly require in skills we cultivate in those moving up in our organizations?
Yes.
Or do you think we will see that happening?
I think we're already seeing that. I think we are seeing it through, there are people who have built a personal brand on social media that are quickly rising to the top of organizations because of the tremendous influence that they have built in the conversation on social media, right? I can think of a few people, and I can't think of their names right now off the top of my head, but where I have seen this happen, where I go, I see what happened here. You built a brand because you're passionate about that. you've been out there talking about, the need for earlier diagnosis around this particular health issue over here. And everyone has flocked to that because people are like, yes, this is a topic everyone needs to know about. I'm passionate about it too. Their following gets larger, their visibility gets larger. Companies look at that and they go, we want a leader like that in our organization. We're a brand that's also passionate about that early detection for that disease state. Come over here. We're going to put you, vice president, senior vice president of this, area of the business. And of course, they got the double benefit of that, right? They have a tremendous leader that's already passionate about this topic, but they are also bringing with them this entire platform, a following, right? They're influential online. And so I do think that it's already happening. I think that increasingly companies and organizations should be looking for that. Is it 100% a requisite? We're probably not there yet. But I think we're headed in that direction. What are your thoughts?
The way that we take in information and the way that companies can build relationships with people, we no longer can rely just on PR and marketing. So I think it becomes a core function of employees in certain roles to make sure they're building those relationships. And so I think it's not whether we want it to be or not, or whether we think it is fair or should be. I think it's just the reality of the world we live in. Companies have to be more transparent. People working for these companies that therefore have to be more transparent. And I think we have to think more like ourselves as publishers than, companies who advertise. It's an expectation of our customers. And I think the companies that learn to do that and do that well and authentically are the ones that are going to win in the future and be able to build their brands.
And I love this notion of setting those expectations as you're looking at, your roster of future leaders and the talent pool that sits inside of your organization to say, we're looking for those that are willing to step up and become a multiplier of our thought leadership. And this is because it sets that expectation early. And now right? Yeah. And you can opt out of that. Organizations do that all over the place. These are the 10 things we look for in future leaders of our company. And if this becomes one of them, you're either in or you're out on that, and that's okay. But it allows people to think about that, whether that's them or not, and then have time to learn and do before it's prime time and you're literally stepping into the C-suite.
Yeah, absolutely. We've talked for a long time, fair or not, about people who have executive presence. And I think this may become part of what just fits in there. And personally, regardless of the skills that you bring or how comfortable you are being out there, it's still relatively controlled and safe in terms of what you do put out there. I think it's easier to get someone skilled in being a thought leader on social media than it is to get someone really comfortable on stage personally. So I don't know that it's that far of a leap. Can I ask you one other question coming from the other angle?
Yeah.
So there are also companies that are, I think, afraid to build their brand through leader voices with the mentality of they're building their personal brand, not our brand, or what if they leave? So have you had situations like that where you have actually had to convince a client that it is in their best interest to put their executives out there?
Yeah, so this is a common concern, if you will, of, what happens now we've got all this sort of equity in that particular individual. And, it just is.
Yep.
It just is, right? And I think that people understand that, people make career transitions all the time. And, while maybe years ago it was like, oh my gosh, there must be scandalous, there must be a story behind that person left. I think people understand that new opportunities come all the time. And so, and I think there's a way to sort of manage that transition and partner with that person on when they are leaving, sharing, the why and the pride that they have for the company and the work that they've done. And the idea is that there isn't just one person for your brand that is sharing thought leadership on social media, because it mitigates the risk then. If you've got multiples, then it's less risky, and partner with them upon a transitional period. And the brand should also be like, we're, saying farewell to, Jen on, our channels and off to the next thing. And, wow, thank you for partnering with us to advance the important conversation around these real issues in our industry. And they can, shout out the rest of the folks that are inside of that same, who are the other 4, 5, 6 leaders that are also doing that inside of the organization to kind of cross share follower base.
I love what you said, and I'm going to repeat it if that's okay for that reason. You aren't going to keep yourself safe by staying off of social media and your executives in the back behind that. You're going to keep yourself safe by having multiple voices out there, so it isn't dependent upon one person. And I think that's a super important point.
Yeah, and I like I said, I think this happens all the time, that people make transitions in their career, and we shouldn't be afraid of that. We shouldn't let that be the thing that holds us back, because guess what? It will happen. Yeah, so let's give some examples of executives who do this well inside of healthcare. Do you have some that come to mind for you, Jen, that you think do a nice job?
Yeah, I think I have 2. I think there are a lot that do this and do this well and pave the path for others that do it very naturally. There are 2 women, just happen to be women, that come to mind for me in the healthcare space. So do you want me to list them and then?
Yeah. Say who they are and talk about what they're doing that you think they do particularly well.
Okay. And I think they're similar. Karen Lynch, who leads CVS, and Bryony Wynn, who leads Carillon Health Solutions. I think they both lead with their areas of passion, what they believe in, what's brought them to the industry. Particularly, I think Bryony is great about engaging on the subject first. So she's not out there representing the brand. She's strengthening the brand as a result, but she's good at being out there on the subject itself, being authentic and engaging with others, and being willing to carry on at least a short conversation online in a humble, authentic, real way.
I love that.
How about you?
Well, to me, the case study on how to do this well has to be, in my mind, Dr. Sushan Jain, CEO, President and CEO of Scan Health, right? Like I say that name and you're like nodding your head. He, to me, sets the bar in the industry. He, 1 out of every, say, 10 to 15 posts is actually about his company, Scan Health, give or take. And this is pretty rare. I don't see a lot of other thought leaders or just leaders in general that can come close to getting that ratio right. A lot of executives have far more content in the promotional bucket, content about their own company, but he doesn't. And, similar to what you said, about Karen and Bryony, is that his voice is really about being a champion for real change in healthcare and topics that he cares about, ethics within healthcare, good leadership traits, which frankly transcends the health industry. It's relevant to all industries. But then you'll talk about things like ageism or value-based care, health equity. And I'll tell you, this guy is on every podium. Yeah. He's on a podium at every one of the major conferences. And, it's not that. What's that?
And pulls people in.
It's not a coincidence. No. It is not a coincidence that he's getting these podiums.
No.
Another one. Sorry, go ahead.
Can I say one more thing? And I think that has transcended each organization that he has been with too. And those organizations have benefited from that greatly.
Yeah. I just thought of another one, actually. Andy Slavitt.
Yes.
He was the voice everyone turned to during COVID when, there was a lot of sort of, misinformation out there, and he spent hours.
Yep.
Hours upon hours scrolling through data and presenting factual information to help people make smart decisions. And we don't have that need anymore, in the early stages in the throes of COVID, but he built a platform and a commitment to being the guy who was going to talk about the real issues and
Yes.
put forward factual information that was going to help people. He wasn't one I was planning to mention, but when you talked about how it can span, you can start out in this one sort of area and then make a transition. That's a great example where, he sort of started out being the guy that was going to help with information on COVID-19 and here we are, and he's still out there talking about the change that's needed in healthcare. But another example I wanted to share was Dr. Angela Fusaro. She's the founder of Physician 360, and they're all about reinventing primary care. But she also does a really nice job of focusing on real issues within the industry, the mental health crisis for parents, diversity, equity, and inclusion. But one of the things that I really appreciate about what she does is a really good job of using video in her feed. She'll turn on her camera, talk about what she's passionate about, and we know that video performs really well on social, and it just helps people really connect authentically with the individual way better than words in the feed can do. And I think she's likely elevating her visibility as a result of her, very strong use of video.
Yeah, and that doesn't have to be perfectly polished and expensive on social media either. I think what probably all of those examples have in common is they are really good at being true to their lane, but being very clear that they're bringing value to the audience. So they're not thinking of it as marketing.
Or a scripted conversation, right? It's just very spontaneous. Something happens, warrants conversation, and they're getting out there and sharing it.
Yep.
So I wanted to put a nice little bow, I think, on what does good look like. I think, we illustrated some of that with these examples. How do people really do it well? And I think consistent presence is extremely important. Right? To me, good looks like posting 4 to 6 times a week. And I know that sounds like a lot. And maybe we start in the, 2 to 4, 3 to 5 range. Like we've got to get started. But I think we got to work up to 4 to 6 times a week. We mentioned talking about real issues that need to be addressed within the industry. 80% of the time needs to be spent there. And the other 20% is for your company.
Yes. Yes. I agree.
And this is probably a very unpopular opinion because a lot of the executive leadership is spending more like 100% of the time focused on the company initiatives.
Yeah. And that, as we know, just it doesn't work. We want it to work. It doesn't work. There's an audience there to gain information for themselves. I would add to that also a certain amount of time. Nobody wants to go and hear a one-sided conversation either, or someone who just wants to be on the bully pulpit. But I think to really convince people that you care about the community who is there and the issue, you need to also be seeking out exciting ideas from others. And to some extent, and in a careful way, engaging in a little bit of that back and forth.
I totally agree. And the algorithm is built for this, right? Yes. There is a metrics-driven conversation that the algorithm will reward you for meaningful engagement. So they need to pick their top 10, top 20 thought leaders that they admire and follow on LinkedIn, and then watch their feed for something to comment on, to pose a question around. In addition to then when people are commenting on their own posts, taking the time to go back and say, thank you for your comment. Thank you for your feedback. I love what you said there. This is really great perspective. Because again, the algorithm is looking for that, but also the people are looking for that too.
Yes. And being willing to say to someone else who may even be your competitor in the right situation, great job. I see what you all are doing there.
I love that. That's such a confident statement, right? To be able to reach out to a competitor in the space and pat them on the back for a job well done, because we're all at the end of the day striving towards the same thing, which is better outcomes, better quality, a lower cost in healthcare. I love that sense of, really we're all on the same side of the table.
Yeah. I think that's how you convince people that you are purpose driven. there's something that people come above profits.
Well, I think we're out of time in the conversation today, but I just wanted to end by kind of recapping some of what you talked about. If your executives are not actively engaging on LinkedIn, now is the time to build a strategy and a framework around that. Make it a priority for 2025. Help them document their core beliefs. Help them make this something that can work into their week. Set them up for success, starting with that planning, empowering them, coaching them, boosting their confidence, giving them feedback along the way, because what this is going to do for you and your brand is increase the reach of your thought leadership, increase trust. Your brand will be perceived more favorably. Support sales, because buyers are more likely to buy from a brand that they trust and that they see as engaging in meaningful conversations. And you will get more requests for press interviews and speaking engagements.
Yeah, it's all related. Exactly what you said, Sarah.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jen, for coming alongside of me in this conversation today. I had a lot of fun. I hope you did as well.
I had a ball. Thank you.
Yeah. And thanks to you, to our listeners, for being part of the Health Marketing Collective, where strong leadership meets marketing excellence, because the future of healthcare depends on it. And if you're a fan of the show, do us a favor and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'll catch you in Las Vegas.